Afternoon, it's Adil Fazal here, market analyst for CFDs.com, a leading spread betting and CFD brokerage company. If you'd like to know more about the services and free products, please visit the actual website. The details are here. Okay, so it's the spelled CFDS.com, pronounced as CFDs.com. Okay, so certainly visit the website and certainly look to open up a broking account there. Okay folks, so the European market wrap up, let's get started. Okay, so basically currently the markets give you a wrap up or a closure. The US markets at this current juncture at the moment are trading negative, all down to Greece, and bonds, or shall we say yields. It's all about the bond yields and the expectation or anticipation, you can call it what you want, but basically the economic data out of the US in terms of unit labor costs certainly came in stronger than expected, so that certainly puts pressure on the actual Fed to start raising rates, and also the jobs data in terms of jobless claims certainly came out stronger as well. So I'll try to discuss the market or price action today in chronological order and tell you exactly what the market position is. Okay. So US markets at the current juncture obviously negative. The European markets obviously flushed and finished negative also, and it's certainly under immense pressure as we speak. The DAX itself is currently trading in the 11,250 region, the French CAC 4,950, the Euro Stoxx the 3,525 region, and the FTSE has fallen as low as 6,820. Okay, so and that's a stark contrast to obviously where it finished. I mean, we had the FTSE finishing around the 6,860, so it's dropped almost 40 plus points since then. We've had the Euro Stoxx finishing around the 3,556 level, so dropped another 20-30 from there, and the DAX is almost down 100 points from that close, which is quite substantial. And the reason being why, it's all about Greece. So I'll try and, like I said, sum up everything from a chronological perspective in terms of fundamentals. And look at the actual economic news flow, etc. Okay folks, so Asian markets overnight, the Nikkei finished more or less flat. The Shanghai was down quite substantially due to margin concerns again. Okay, and but actually finished in reverse and actually finished pretty impressively higher. Okay, then we had the Hang Seng, which was obviously negative from that perspective. So we came into today with the news that Greece, obviously talk about Greece not fulfilling its obligation in terms of its payment and so on and so forth, and basically the negative news on Greece. Okay, and that obviously sent the markets into a frenzy. Not only that, we also had the comments from Mr. Draghi yesterday with regards to obviously expectations of volatility going forward, and obviously him raising inflation forecasts, which obviously led to the yields spiking. Okay, with the bonds falling. So if I bring up a chart of the bonds, the Eurobond chart, and try to explain from that perspective. Let's just bring this up for you. There we go. Okay, so as you can see here, daily chart. Let's try and zoom in for you, give you a better perspective on things. Okay, so the Eurobond chart obviously falling from yesterday. We had a pivot low this morning around 9 o'clock, and the market obviously put in a bottoming tail doji, and then obviously has reversed ever since. And that obviously caused the Euro USD to spike higher, although we have reversed back down now quite substantially. So if I just bring up a chart of the Euro USD, you'll be able to see that. Obviously that positive relationship with the, or shall we say inverse relationship, inverse to yields obviously. But the actual Euro US, the bond itself, so obviously the bond going higher, so inverse to the bond, positive to the yield. So the bond itself obviously selling off quite substantially, caused the euro obviously to rise substantially because of the yield factor, etc. And then obviously the bonds itself starting to move higher, given the fact that obviously Mr. Draghi has pledged unequivocal allegiance to buying bonds and obviously helping the eurozone and maintaining its QE program. So therefore the euro bond or bonds itself will remain bid, because the central bank is the sole, well, we shouldn't really say sole buyer, but given the fact that the central bank has your back and it's a central bank put, then obviously that will certainly come into the equation and certainly play into the equation. Okay, so we had a reversal given the fact that we did put in a topping tail, and the markets have reversed ever since. So where do we go from here? Okay, good question. Right, let's try and let's try and sum this up. Okay, let's try and sum this up in terms of the market itself. Okay, so European markets now. Let's go to the European markets, bring up a chart, the DAX, which is the leader in Europe, and give you a summary here. Okay, so the 10-minute chart explains it all, really. We had a sell-off from the outset. Okay, sell-off here. Okay, bonds obviously selling off towards the close at 9 AM. Where is your pivot low on the German DAX? At 9 AM. Okay, so a pivot low on the bonds, okay, and that obviously caused a pivot low on the DAX. The DAX started to rally, bonds have rallied ever since, okay, until we actually get to gap fill on the German DAX at 11,420. The market obviously finds resistance, and then obviously we've sold off ever since. Okay, so interesting little observation there, folks. Okay, very, very interesting observation. So something certainly worth keeping an eye out for going ahead. Okay, just bear with me. Let's see what we can do here. Okay, so something certainly worth considering, of, like I said, going forward. Okay, that's the situation or scenario with regards to the German DAX, and that literally sums everything up. Okay, so we had news, so based on fundamentals, okay, and looking at it from a chronological perspective. Then we had some news with regards to Greece and it making fulfilling its debt obligation and making a payment, etc., so on and so forth. Given the fact that we had an IMF statement regarding, actually prior to that we had stronger, which actually triggered the reversal and which helped the reversal to a substantial amount, was the actual headline regarding the economic data. We had jobless claims better than expected. We had unit labour costs rising, therefore that helped the dollar started to spike. Obviously the bonds obviously caught a bit even further. Obviously, given the fact that you had stronger US data, obviously that helps the economy in the US. And then the European markets obviously pushed, sorry, the US markets pushed high and the European markets continued and followed and so on and so forth, and hence the reason why we had the 11,450 top on the European markets, the German DAX, going into the US Open, and ever since then obviously we flushed and reversed in the opposite direction. Okay, so after that, subsequently thereafter, we also had a news flow with regards to the IMF talking about a potential pushing back of interest rate hikes to 2016 or early 2016, i.e. take September out the equation in terms of rate hikes, and that obviously then fed through in terms of dollar weakness, etc., and then the markets obviously took its cue from there. Okay, so that certainly needs to be taken into consideration as well. So that's an interesting insight with regards to the actual currency and bond markets themselves. Okay, then we had some news flow with regards to a potential 10.6 billion tranche or payment, etc., being discussed for the Greek government. Okay, so that obviously paved the way in terms of softening of tone and rhetoric on both sides, and therefore one would presume and one would expect the markets obviously should start to or maintain their rally and consolidate and obviously look for the next move higher. That obviously wasn't the case, because the latest news that we've had now is that the actual rhetoric has actually increased or intensified. Okay, and the latest news that we're getting is that Euro continues to move lower. Latest updates are Greece rejecting latest proposal from creditors allied to the bundling of payments. Greece refuses to make 305 million IMF payment. Greece's finance ministry says asks creditors to immediately move to more realistic proposals. Greece to miss IMF payment and asked to bundle them up. So they've actually asked for a bundling of the payments as opposed to one lump sum payment. Okay, risk with Greek bundling plan is ECB increases collateral haircuts, that scares depositors, and capital controls then imposed. So all this news flow at this current juncture obviously is pretty negative. Will the markets obviously embrace a Grexit? I very much doubt it. It's all noise at this very moment in time, and obviously has spooked the stock market to quite a substantial obviously degree. So the uncertainty and the fear certainly is there, but a lot of it has been factored in now with the German DAX down almost 100 points. Okay, so that's the situation that we find ourselves in. Again, the market is king and the market will dictate whichever move it makes. It's our job to react to the actual bias and to the risk in the market at the time. Okay, right, so that's the explanation of events thus far. I mean, it's for an average trader, it's very, very hard. I mean, if you don't understand or appreciate fundamentals or have no insight, thank God obviously I have an economics degree that helps me, and even then to a large extent it requires a lot of further analysis and further understanding and interpretation and reading and so on and so forth. I mean, but thank God I have the ability to obviously interpret almost every market move there is from a obviously economic perspective, which is very important for me to understand and appreciate in order to locate and work out the bias. So the bias at this very current juncture at present is obviously negative, but one could argue from a technical perspective that's already been factored into the equation. Again, the market is king, and the market will move based on the latest headline. Given the fact that the actual will and the resolve from the German government and European members to obviously reach a deal, it seems very unlikely that we'll actually go towards a Grexit. It's more to do with last minute game of chicken. That's basically what it is. Okay, they obviously realise that they're going to make this payment, there's going to be a resolution, and they're trying to get the best outcome possible, especially given the fact that Mr. Varoufakis openly states that he's a proponent, or it's a big fan of game theory. So obviously he's playing his games in the background, which really are quite dangerous, but it is what it is at this current juncture. Okay, so that's basically where we stand. Okay, so the most important thing here from a technical perspective, and this is quite interesting from an intermarket analysis perspective, okay, is the fact that we've actually got the Nasdaq going hitting into or coming into gap fill. Okay, so if I bring up the chart of the Nasdaq, you can see here on a 10-minute chart, obviously we've closed the gap at 4473. We've had a bullish engulfing candle ever since, pushed up highs 4488. We are looking for a bull flag consolidation and obviously markets to reverse higher. Okay, so that's certainly something to take into consideration. Now, looking at other charts, if I just bring up the chart of the German DAX again, let's go to the daily chart now of the German DAX, and you can see there we put in a doji, we put in a bottoming tail, and obviously we've held that horizontal support. Given the fact that the euro obviously has reversed, given the fact that we've had stronger US data, regardless of what the IMF said in terms of obviously delaying payments, in terms of obviously delaying the interest rates to 2016, that should certainly help the risk on trade in terms of obviously front running the Kool-Aid and the QE, etc., and any potential postponement. Now obviously the uncertainty regarding Greece or surrounding Greece could also be utilized, because the Fed has stated international developments. They have cited or started to cite international developments, so that's certainly something worth considering. Okay, so German DAX is currently in its held its horizontal support level. The 60-minute chart on the German DAX, you can see here now, has bounced off this horizontal support. We obviously fail the inverted head and shoulders formation, which is obviously pretty negative given the fact that the bearish news on Greece, and obviously the volatility from Mr. Draghi yesterday in terms of his inflation forecast, and obviously forecasting extreme volatility ahead. Although he did pledge his allegiance to QE, so that therefore the central bank put certainly remains active and certainly remains valid. Okay, so we are in this bearish channel. Okay, so we still remain in this bearish channel, but we are certainly putting in a reversal pattern from my perspective. Okay, this may well be our head for the inverted head and shoulders formation that we were initially attempting. So we're looking at a left shoulder there. Obviously we're putting in a head, we're looking to push higher, potentially reverse, and then obviously then look to move and eventually break out. So we certainly seem to be respecting this channel at this current juncture. So that's something that we certainly keep an eye out for and observe going forward. So if I just draw this in here, okay, so that's certainly a better channel, one that market certainly seems to be more obedient to. Okay, so that's the channel that we find ourselves in, and we are looking to potentially break out of it, given the fact that we are making a base. We've put in a base again, we've negated this bearish engulfing candle, market's reversed. The euro, its USD certainly seems to have reversed as well, given the fact that we have put in a potential pivot low in the bunds. Okay, so if we look at Eurobond, and given the fact that we have got allegiance from Mr. Draghi, the daily chart itself has put in a potential bottoming tail, and the bulls certainly are coming on board. Okay, if I go to a 4-hour chart, see if we can get a better perspective, given the fact that we've got a bullish engulfing candle, given the fact that we've got stronger US data, and that should certainly help and aid the cause there. Okay, now the scenario with regards to the French CAC, let's bring the French CAC up and look at the potential setup there. The French CAC itself, let me just clean these charts up. Okay, so we certainly have held this potential support. We've put in a doji, horizontal support has certainly held. Looking at a 60-minute chart, the French Okay, horizontal support certainly held. Okay, so we are putting in a base here now on the 4940 level, currently at 4950 in the futures market, hence the reason why we're looking for a potential pop and a bounce. Let's go to the Euro stocks. Bring up the chart of the Euro stocks now. Okay, so daily chart of the Euro stocks. Go to a daily chart. Okay, so again we've held that pivot support, put in a bottoming tail, put in a doji. Certainly impressive price action if you are obviously you're on the bullish side of the equation. We've pushed higher, closed a gap, and given the fact that we didn't actually make a substantial lower low, the market obviously has the unfilled gap above, and I am looking for a potential move higher from here. So again, going to be observing this like a hawk. Okay, and given the fact that looking for a potential higher low. Okay, so rather than a lower high and lower low, looking for a higher low, and that should be a reversal based on some type of Greek obviously agreement, especially given the fact that US data strong, Asian markets okay overnight, other than the Greek scenario, and given the fact that bonds have certainly stabilized as well, or everything points to the bullish direction from my perspective. Okay folks, that's my perspective on things. Okay, so the European 350, again this is a very important chart from my perspective. This was one of the charts that was dragging the Euro indices down, given the fact that we've held gap fill, we've put in a bottoming tail there that from my understanding that's considered to be bullish, and we are looking for a thrust higher. Okay, so looking at the FTSE Europe chart again as well, we've put in a bottom there, we've closed the gap, and we have inside consolidation, we've got an unfilled gap to fill above, so therefore that's interpreted as being bullish as well. That's my interpretation of events thus far. Okay, now the actual chart of oil, if I bring up the commodities and let's just look at the commodity side of the equation. Daily chart, obviously we have flushed lower, we're into the 50 MA now, looking at a 4-hour chart of oil, which is very important. Again, we're coming into potential support for oil, so therefore this needs to be respected as well. Okay, so the oil chart certainly into support, and we are looking for a potential thrust higher, therefore that should help the FTSE 100. Okay, so the uncertainty certainly remains. Again, the copper is obviously coming into support, therefore we are looking for a potential thrust higher after breaking out of that bullish channel. Again, we are coming into horizontal support, therefore that means or indicates to me that you are looking for a bounce in the FTSE 100 too. There are other charts I can show you, but then we'd be here all day folks. Let's just quickly have a look at the US markets and see what the situation is there. The Dow itself, important index, inside bar from my perspective on the Dow Transport, so that's certainly interpreted as being bullish. The Dow Jones, let's just bring up the Dow Jones. I mean Shanghai, as you can see there, very impressive on the weekly chart. Okay, bring up the Greenhaven, FTSE 100, we didn't touch that, so let's just go over that. And try and give you an interpretation of events there. Okay, daily chart, again diagonal trend line support, so therefore indicating support, pretty impressive, has held. Okay, we did bounce obviously temporarily. We are holding this downward sloping, well we are in this downward sloping wedge type pattern. We did put in a pivot high at 6913 before reversing quite powerfully into the close, given the uncertainty regarding Greece and this news about this tranche payment that they're going to be making. Obviously that's certainly dealt a blow to sentiment. The FTSE itself currently that pivot support at 6840 should hold for my interpretation of events, especially given the fact that the oil prices are into support as well, so that's certainly something to keep an eye out for. That 6840, 6850 pivot low again will be solid support for the FTSE, and we are in this downward sloping contracting wedge type pattern. Okay, 10-minute chart, bring up the chart, the FTSE 100. Again, we're in this zone. We've from my perspective, if we take the pivot low, take it to the pivot high that we touched today, we're coming back to the 61 to 75% fib should hold into the cash open tomorrow. If not, then obviously 6840 is a solid support zone for the FTSE 100, so that's certainly something that we keep an eye out for as well. Okay, going into potentially going into tomorrow. Okay, so that's the scenario and that's the situation that we currently are in. Okay, so that's a wrap folks. Again, like I said, certainly visit cfds.com and there is a website or a blog that I will be updating all the charts on a daily basis, constantly in real time, so certainly keep an eye out for that. Also follow my Twitter handle at cfds_education for daily commentary, analysis, etc. Obviously my YouTube videos you're following anyway. Certainly share and pass on to your trading buddies. Okay folks, so risk on, risk off, wax on, wax off. Goodbye now.